His presence overwhelmed her. The Apache's quiet command, "Look at me. Just me." It was a quiet morning in the small town, the kind of morning that carried a peaceful hush over the streets. Birds chirped softly, and the air smelled faintly of earth and morning dew. The sun had just begun to rise, spilling gentle light across the rooftops, painting them gold. In one of the narrow streets, a young woman named Elena walked briskly, clutching a small basket of fresh bread she had bought from the local bakery. She liked to walk early in the morning because the town felt untouched by the busyness of life at that hour. Elena had always been independent. She had grown up in a household where she often had to rely on herself, learning to take care of her younger siblings while her parents worked long hours. Life had taught her to be strong, but it had also left her with a quiet loneliness. She had friends, yes, and people admired her for her intelligence and kindness, but there was a part of her heart that longed for something more, something she could not put into words. She often wondered if she would ever meet someone who understood the depth of her thoughts, someone whose presence alone could make her feel safe and seen. As she turned a corner near the town square, she noticed a man standing near the fountain. At first glance, he seemed ordinary, simply dressed, tall and calm. But there was something about him that caught her attention immediately. His posture was upright but relaxed, like a tree rooted firmly in the ground, unshaken by anything around him. His eyes, dark and steady, scanned the square without seeming to look at anything in particular. And yet, when they met hers for a fleeting moment, she felt a strange pull in her chest. He was an Apache man, though she did not know much about him. Something in the way he carried himself told her that he was different from anyone she had met before. There was a quiet strength in his presence, a confidence that did not demand attention but naturally drew it. Elena felt both curious and hesitant. She had learned over the years to notice people, to observe them carefully, and there was no doubt in her mind that this man was someone rare. She slowed her pace, pretending to examine the flowers planted along the edge of the square, all the while stealing glances at him. He seemed unaware, or perhaps perfectly aware, of her attention. When he finally turned his gaze in her direction, she could not look away. There was an intensity in his eyes, not harsh, but profound, as if he could see the thoughts she tried to hide even from herself. Her heart beat faster as she quickly looked down at her basket, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that she did not fully understand. Elena continued walking, though her mind was already wandering. She wondered who he was, why he had come to their quiet town, and what kind of life he led. There was a story behind those calm eyes, a story she longed to know but feared she might never hear. Something about him made the world seem both larger and smaller at the same time, the way a quiet stream can reflect the sky while holding depths unseen. The man moved slowly toward the fountain, his steps deliberate and unhurried. Elena watched him, captivated, noticing the way his hands relaxed by his sides, the slight tilt of his head as he looked at the flowing water, and the gentle way he breathed, as if he were entirely at peace in the world. She could feel a strange mixture of calm and excitement in his presence, and it unsettled her in a way that was both frightening and thrilling. She had never felt this before, not even with people she had known for years. For a moment, he seemed to glance directly at her again. This time, she did not look away immediately. There was a silent communication in that glance, a wordless understanding that something significant had shifted, even if neither of them could explain it. Elena felt herself drawn toward him, but at the same time a sense of caution held her back. She had learned through life's lessons to protect her heart, to guard it carefully. Yet there was something about him that made her want to take a risk, to step into the unknown and see where it might lead. The fountain's water sparkled in the morning light, and a gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the nearby trees. The town was slowly waking up. A few shopkeepers were opening their doors, and the sound of distant footsteps and soft chatter began to fill the square. Elena felt as if she were in a bubble of time, a place where only she and the stranger existed. The world around them seemed to blur slightly, leaving only the quiet connection of two people who had not yet spoken, but had already noticed each other in a way that mattered. Elena's curiosity got the better of her. She adjusted the basket in her hands and stepped closer to the fountain, pretending to tie her shoelace. The man noticed her movement but did not comment. Instead, he continued to watch the water, his face calm but alert, as if he were observing not just the fountain but everything around him with quiet attention. Elena found herself wishing she could speak to him, to ask him about his life, to understand the depth behind his quiet strength. But words failed her. She felt unprepared, unsure of what to say, and strangely aware that any ordinary greeting might feel clumsy in the presence of someone so commanding. Time passed slowly, and the small interactions of the morning continued. A child ran past, laughing, and the man's eyes briefly followed the movement, softening slightly. Elena noticed this small change and felt a flutter of warmth. It reminded her that beneath his quiet command, there was humanity, a gentleness that did not need to be announced, but could be felt in small moments. She wondered what stories his eyes could tell, what lessons he had learned, and what experiences had shaped him into the man she now found impossible to ignore. Eventually, the man began to walk away, his steps measured and confident. Elena felt a pang of disappointment, realizing she might never have another chance to speak to him, or perhaps that the moment had already left its mark in ways she could not yet understand. She watched him move through the town square, blending into the small crowd, and felt an unfamiliar ache in her chest. It was not longing in the usual sense, but a recognition that something important had entered her life, something that demanded attention even if it remained mysterious. Elena continued her walk home, her mind replaying every detail of the encounter. She remembered the calm strength in his posture, the intensity of his eyes, and the way his presence seemed to occupy space without overwhelming it. She felt as if she had glimpsed something rare, something that could change the way she saw the world and herself. The thought filled her with both excitement and fear, a mix of emotions she had not felt in years. When she reached her small home, she set down the basket and leaned against the doorframe, taking a deep breath. The morning had begun like any other, yet it felt completely different. There was a sense of possibility now, a quiet anticipation that something meaningful might come from a brief encounter with a stranger whose presence had overwhelmed her in the most unexpected way. Elena realized that life had a way of introducing people at the right moment, sometimes without explanation, leaving only the memory of their presence and the subtle promise of what might come next. For hours afterward, she found herself thinking about him, wondering what he had been thinking, whether he had noticed her as much as she had noticed him, and whether this quiet town could ever contain someone so extraordinary. She could not explain the pull she felt, and she did not try. Instead, she allowed herself to sit with the feeling, to let it simmer quietly, knowing that something significant had just begun, though she had no idea where it would lead. And so, the morning ended with the sun climbing higher in the sky, the town bustling with life, and Elena standing at the edge of something new and profound. She did not yet know the story that would unfold between her and the Apache man, but she felt it in every heartbeat, in every breath, and in the quiet moments when the world seemed still. His presence had entered her life like a whisper, gentle but impossible to ignore, leaving her both overwhelmed and strangely alive. The days after their first meeting passed slowly for Elena. Each morning she found herself scanning the town square, almost hoping to see the Apache man again. She told herself it was curiosity, a passing interest in someone unusual, but deep down, she knew it was more. His presence had left a mark on her that she could not ignore. Even in her work, in the hum of daily life, she felt the echo of his calm, commanding presence lingering in her mind. She tried to keep herself busy running errands, helping neighbors, and attending to her small responsibilities. But every time she walked past the fountain, she caught herself holding her breath, expecting to see him there. And sometimes, for a fleeting second, she thought she did. A shadow crossing the path, the curve of a shoulder, a movement too deliberate to be random. It all made her heart race. Yet when she looked closely, it was always someone else. Still, the feeling of anticipation refused to leave her. One afternoon, she had an errand at the marketplace. The sun was high, and the air was warm, carrying the scents of fresh bread, spices, and flowers. The streets were busy with merchants calling out, children running in the alleys, and townspeople exchanging greetings. Elena moved carefully through the crowd, her basket in hand, when she caught sight of him again. He was standing by a stall selling woven blankets, examining the patterns with careful attention. His posture was the same as before, calm, grounded, and commanding. But this time there was a subtle openness in his stance, as if he were slightly aware that she might be watching. Elena's heart leapt, and she froze for a moment, unsure whether to approach or stay hidden. She decided to walk past slowly, pretending to examine the fruits and vegetables, but her eyes never left him. He glanced up, meeting her gaze for a brief instant, and this time she did not look away immediately. There was no word spoken, yet something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement that each had noticed the other. Her breath caught, and she felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had never experienced a connection like this, so quiet, yet so profound. For several days after, they continued to see each other in passing. Sometimes he was at the fountain, sometimes in the marketplace, and occasionally she noticed him from across the street, walking with deliberate calm. Each encounter was brief, never lasting more than a few moments, but each left a deep impression on her. She began to observe him closely, noting the subtle details, the way he adjusted his coat when the wind blew, the careful attention with which he examined everyday objects, the faint smile that sometimes touched his lips. Elena realized that she was drawn to him not because of anything dramatic or loud, but because of the quiet strength he carried. He did not need to speak to command attention. His presence alone was enough. And yet, there was kindness in it, a gentleness that made her feel safe rather than overwhelmed. She wondered about his life, where he came from, what stories he carried, and how someone could be so grounded in themselves. One morning she finally found the courage to speak, though only in a small, seemingly casual way. She approached him near the fountain, pretending to drop a piece of paper at his feet. "Excuse me," she said softly, bending to pick it up. When she looked up, their eyes met again. This time, there was no need for words. His gaze held hers, steady and deep, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them. "You dropped something," he said quietly, handing her the paper. His voice was calm, even, and carried a strange weight of sincerity. Elena took the paper, her fingers brushing against his for just a second, and she felt a shiver run through her. She smiled awkwardly, trying to hide the sudden nervousness that had settled over her. "Thank you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging more than just the paper. There was an unspoken understanding in his eyes, a recognition of something deeper than this brief exchange. Helena wanted to say more, to ask him questions, to understand why she felt so drawn to him. But the words escaped her. Instead, she walked away slowly, feeling the lingering pull of his presence behind her. Over the next few weeks, their encounters became a small rhythm in her life. She noticed patterns, where he liked to sit, how he observed the world around him, and how he seemed to notice things that others overlooked. It fascinated her. She began to see the world differently herself, noticing small details and subtle beauty she had once ignored. The Apache man's quiet awareness was contagious, teaching her without words to slow down and truly see. One afternoon, a small incident brought them closer. A child chasing a ball ran too close to the fountain and slipped, nearly falling into the water. Elena gasped and reached for the child, but before she could, the man moved with swift, precise calmness, catching the child effortlessly. He handed the child back to a relieved mother without a word, his actions quiet but commanding. Elena watched, her admiration growing. There was something in the way he acted, protective but unobtrusive, that left a mark on her. She realized that his strength was not just in his presence, but in the way he carried responsibility without needing recognition. That evening, Elena walked home, thinking about him more than she cared to admit. She realized that she had been longing for a connection like this, someone who could be a quiet anchor in her life, someone whose presence alone could make her feel understood. She had experienced many friendships, even a few fleeting romances, but nothing had ever stirred her as this had. There was a calmness, a depth, and a silent power in him that made her question what she truly wanted in life. She also began to notice her own reactions, Her thoughts often wandered to him, and small things reminded her of their encounters. The sound of water, a steady gaze, a gentle movement. She found herself thinking of him at unexpected moments, smiling quietly to herself. It was as if his presence had awakened something in her, a part of her heart she had kept hidden for too long. Despite the growing connection, there was also hesitation. Elena was aware of her feelings but unsure how to express them. She had learned from life that the heart could be fragile and that vulnerability often brought pain. Yet at the same time, she knew that avoiding this connection entirely would be a loss she could not bear. The quiet man had entered her life in a way that demanded attention, and she could not turn away no matter how cautious she felt. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Elena found herself walking near the fountain once again. The Apache man was there, sitting on the edge, his eyes following the movement of the water. She approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. He looked up, and this time there was a flicker of recognition that went beyond casual acknowledgement.
"Hello," she said softly, unsure of what else to add.
He nodded, his expression calm but inviting.
"Hello," he replied.
There was a pause, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Elena felt a strange mix of excitement and fear, knowing that this quiet connection had the power to change her life. They walked together for a while, speaking in small, measured sentences. She learned a little about him, where he had traveled, the quiet lessons life had taught him, and the importance he placed on presence and awareness. He did not speak excessively, but every word carried meaning. Elena found herself hanging on to each syllable, absorbing not just his story but the way he shared it, calm, thoughtful, and deliberate. By the time they parted that evening, Elena realized that her life had begun to shift. The world felt richer, more vibrant, and full of possibility. She knew she was only at the beginning of something profound, something that would require patience, courage, and an openness she had rarely allowed herself before. But she also felt a quiet certainty that this connection was rare and worth exploring, no matter the uncertainties ahead. As she walked home, the sky painted in shades of pink and gold, Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. She understood now that life sometimes brought people together not by coincidence, but by the silent timing of moments and presence. And though she did not know what the future held, she knew that the Apache man had already changed her, simply by existing in the world with calm strength and quiet attention. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth from the hills surrounding the town. Elena had risen earlier than usual, her mind still restless from the previous day's encounters. She felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, unsure why a simple meeting could leave her thoughts so consumed. The memory of the Apache man lingered with a strange intensity, as if his presence had imprinted itself on her very heartbeat. She made her way to the town square, weaving through the quiet streets while her heart beat faster with each step. She tried to focus on ordinary things, the sound of the birds, the pattern of the cobblestones beneath her feet, but it was no use. Her mind kept returning to him, the calm strength of his posture, the depth of his eyes, the way he seemed to see not just her, but something within her that no one else had ever noticed. When she arrived at the fountain, he was already there. He sat on the edge, hands resting loosely on his knees, eyes watching the water as if it held a secret he alone could read. The early sunlight reflected off the ripples, dancing on his face, highlighting the quiet lines of concentration and calm in his features. For a moment, Elena felt frozen in place, overwhelmed by the pull of his presence. It was more than curiosity or admiration. This was something deeper, something she could not yet name. She approached slowly, careful not to seem intrusive, and noticed how his eyes lifted to meet hers. This time, there was a subtle difference in his gaze. It was not merely acknowledging her presence, it was commanding her attention in the gentlest, most undeniable way. Her chest tightened, and she felt a sudden nervousness, as if the air itself had grown heavier around them. "Look at me. Just me," he said, his voice low, calm, and steady. The words were simple, almost casual, but there was a weight to them that made Elena's breath catch. He did not raise his voice, nor did he gesture dramatically. He simply met her gaze, and the intensity in his eyes made it impossible to look anywhere else. Elena's mind raced. The words themselves were small, but their meaning struck her like a wave. In that moment, all the noise, all the distractions, all the thoughts that usually filled her head disappeared. There was only him, and the quiet insistence that she focus, truly focus, on the person before her. She felt both vulnerable and safe, as if being seen so completely could somehow heal parts of her she had hidden from the world for too long. Her legs felt heavy, yet she moved closer without realizing it. Her eyes remained locked on his, searching, questioning, yet drawn irresistibly. She had never experienced anything like this. In her life, she had known people who spoke loudly, who demanded attention, who overwhelmed her with their presence. But this was different. He did not overwhelm. He commanded in a way that was quiet, precise, and entirely compelling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elena felt her heart pounding, her thoughts spinning, yet beneath the chaos was a strange clarity. She understood instinctively that this was not just about attraction or curiosity. It was about recognition, about being seen in a way that went beyond words or gestures. She realized she was confronting something within herself, something she had buried under years of responsibility, caution, and self-restraint. Finally, she managed a whisper. I'm looking, she said, unsure if her voice would carry the meaning she felt in her heart. He nodded slightly, a small, approving motion, and the tension in the air shifted. It was still intense, still overwhelming, but now it was filled with possibility rather than fear. He did not say more. There was no need. His gaze, steady and unwavering, conveyed everything that words could not. Aylin felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of connection so deep it left her trembling. The world seemed to fade around them. The fountain, the birds, the quiet town square, all of it blurred into insignificance. There was only this moment, this shared understanding, this fragile yet powerful bridge between two souls. Elena felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness but from the sheer intensity of being truly seen, fully acknowledged, and understood without judgment. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself, and felt a strange mixture of fear and courage. Fear because opening herself to someone so completely was terrifying. Courage because for the first time in years she felt as if it was safe to let her guard down. The Apache man had not demanded anything of her, except that she be present, that she see and be seen, and in that simplicity was a profound lesson.
"I don't know why," she began, her voice barely audible.
"I've never felt like this before." He tilted his head slightly, his expression calm and inviting, but not intrusive.
"You don't need to understand it yet," he said softly. "Just be here. Just be with me." Those words, so simple and yet so powerful, settled over her like a gentle wave. Elena realized that all her questions, all her fears, all the doubts that had weighed on her heart for so long could wait. Right now, there was only presence, only the quiet acknowledgement of each other. It was a strange, liberating feeling, one that left her both grounded and exhilarated at the same time. They stayed like that for several minutes, just looking at each other. Elena noticed the small details she had not seen before, the faint crease of concentration on his forehead, the subtle rise and fall of his chest with each breath, the calm intensity in his eyes that seemed to hold entire stories. She felt herself becoming aware of herself as well, noticing her own breath, her own heartbeat, the way her hands rested in her lap. It was a meditation of sorts, a shared silence that spoke volumes. Eventually, he broke the silence with a small, gentle smile. "You're doing well," he said.
Almost like encouragement rather than praise. "Just keep looking. Keep seeing."
Elena felt a rush of warmth and relief.
She realized that he was teaching her something deeper than attraction or connection. He was teaching her presence, the power of truly seeing and being seen. She had spent so long moving through life on autopilot, focused on duties, fears, and expectations, that she had forgotten the importance of attention, of awareness, of simply existing fully in a moment. The morning sun climbed higher, and the town began to stir with the sounds of daily life. But for Elena, the world outside the square seemed distant, almost unreal. She was tethered to this moment, to this man, in a way that was both grounding and awakening. She felt emotions she could not name: admiration, wonder, curiosity, and a strange, gentle longing. But there was no rush, no demand. Everything was slow, deliberate, intentional. After a while, she realized that she had been standing there longer than she had intended. The Apache man shifted slightly, standing with a quiet grace, and gave her a small nod. It was an unspoken signal that the moment had come to an end, at least for now. She felt a pang of disappointment, but also a deep sense of gratitude. Something significant had occurred, something that would linger in her heart and shape the way she moved through life from that point onward. As she walked away, Elena reflected on the intensity of the encounter. She understood that life sometimes presented moments that demanded attention, not just of the eyes, but of the heart and soul. This was one such moment. The quiet command, "Look at me, just me," was more than a sentence. It was an invitation to presence, to vulnerability, and to trust. She realized she had taken her first step towards something profound, something that could change her entirely if she allowed herself to continue. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elena found herself replaying the morning's encounter over and over, noticing every detail, every nuance, every subtle movement and word. She began to see her own reactions more clearly, how quickly her heart raced, how sharply her thoughts focused, and how profoundly she had been affected by such a simple exchange. It was as if the encounter had opened a door in her heart that she had forgotten existed, revealing both the fragility and the strength within her. That evening she sat quietly in her small home, reflecting on the lessons she had learned without fully realizing it. Presence mattered. Attention mattered. Being seen and seeing someone else fully was a rare and powerful gift, and she understood that the Apache man, in his quiet and deliberate way, had given her a glimpse of something extraordinary, a connection that required no words, only openness and awareness. Elena knew that this was only the beginning. Their story was unfolding slowly, deliberately, and with careful attention. But the intensity of the moment lingered, echoing in her mind and heart like a quiet, steady drumbeat. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the thrill of anticipation, not for what she could control, but for what life might reveal if she was willing to be present and courageous. The days following that unforgettable morning passed with a quiet intensity for Elena. "Different can be good," he replied simply, his eyes locking with hers.
There was no judgment, no expectation, only acknowledgement.
Elena realized in that moment that he had a rare ability to make people feel seen and understood without pressure. It was a gift, one that had slowly begun to shape her own perception of herself. As they walked together along the edge of town, Elena found herself speaking more freely than she had in years. She shared small details about her life, her childhood, her responsibilities, the dreams she had long kept tucked away. He listened with careful attention, his face calm, his eyes steady. There were no interruptions, no unsolicited advice, only the quiet presence of someone truly attentive. "You have carried much on your own," he said gently, after a pause. "Yet here you are, still standing, still moving forward." Elena paused, reflecting on his words. She realized he was right. Life had taught her to rely on herself, to bear burdens quietly, and to protect her heart from disappointment. But in doing so, she had forgotten the value of trust, the beauty of sharing her life with someone who cared not to control it, but to understand it. His quiet acknowledgement of her strength felt like a gentle affirmation, a reminder that vulnerability did not mean weakness. In the following weeks, their bond deepened in ways that were quiet, but significant. They shared small acts of trust, walking together through the fields, exchanging thoughts about the world, even sitting in silence while watching the sun set over the hills. Each interaction was deliberate, measured, and full of meaning. Elena noticed that she began to look forward to these moments, not because of excitement alone, but because they taught her patience, awareness, and emotional courage. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Elena and the Apache man sat together near the river that ran beyond the town. The water reflected the colors of the sunset, moving gently with the current. He did not speak immediately, simply sitting beside her, allowing the silence to exist without discomfort. Elena realized that she had learned something profound from him, the ability to be comfortable with stillness, to let presence itself carry meaning. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but deliberate.
The world moves quickly, he said. People often miss what is right in front of them because they are caught up in noise, in worry, in expectation.
But when you are present, truly present, you see more, you feel more.
You live more.
Elena nodded slowly, absorbing his words. They were simple, yet they carried a depth that made her heart ache with recognition. She understood now that her life had often been lived in haste, in worry, and in anticipation of what might come next. Yet here with him she had discovered a different way to exist, mindful, aware, and connected. Over time, Elena began to notice changes within herself that went beyond thoughtfulness and calm. She became more attuned to the people around her, more patient with small frustrations, more open to experiences she had previously avoided out of fear or hesitation. She recognized that her bond with the Apache man had awakened a part of her that had been dormant, the part that could trust, feel deeply, and engage fully with the world. Their relationship did not rush or demand. There was no dramatic declaration or grand gestures, only small, deliberate moments of attention and care. A shared smile, a quiet conversation, a gentle look, a helping hand. Each act reinforced the quiet connection they were building. Elena found herself learning not only from his actions, but also from his way of being in the world. She began to emulate his calm strength, carrying herself with a sense of grounded confidence that others began to notice. One morning, as they walked together through a sun-dappled grove, Elena spoke softly, almost as if testing the waters. "I've never met anyone like you before," she admitted. You make everything feel different. Calmer, brighter, somehow more possible." He stopped walking and turned to look at her, his expression serious but gentle. "It is not me who changes the world around you. It is you who is opening yourself to it." Elena felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and quiet awe. She realized that he had been guiding her not by telling her what to do or who to be, but by showing her, through example, the power of presence, patience, and understanding. She had been given the gift of perspective, and it was transforming her life in ways she could not yet fully articulate. Days turned into weeks, and their bond continued to strengthen. Elena found herself reflecting on the lessons she had learned from him. She had discovered that trust was not about knowing the outcome, but about being willing to take the first step. She had learned that vulnerability could be a source of strength, and that quiet attention could speak louder than words. And perhaps most importantly, she had begun to understand that real connection required presence, being fully there with someone, in a moment, without distraction or expectation. One afternoon, a small crisis in town brought them even closer. A young boy had wandered too far into the river and slipped, calling for help. Elena's heart raced as she ran toward him. But before she could act, the Apache man was already there, steady and composed. He reached the boy with calm precision, lifting him safely out of the water. The crowd around them gasped and cheered, but he remained composed, handing the boy back to his relieved mother with quiet dignity. Elena watched, her heart swelling with admiration, realizing again how deeply he lived his values through his actions rather than words. That evening, Elena and he sat together near the fountain, reflecting on the day. She spoke softly, her voice tinged with awe. You always know what to do. How can you be so calm?" He smiled faintly, looking at her with those steady, dark eyes. "Calm comes from knowing yourself and being present," he replied. "When you trust yourself and trust the moment, fear loses its power. You are learning that too, even if you do not realize it yet." She understood that he had not only affected her emotions, but had also begun to shape her very character. She was more patient, more observant, more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward herself. The quiet bond they shared was transforming her life in subtle yet profound ways.
As night fell, Elena walked home under a sky full of stars, feeling a sense of calm she had never known before.
The Apache man's influence lingered with her, a quiet force that guided her thoughts, actions, and emotions. She realized that this connection was not just about attraction or admiration, it was about growth, awareness, and learning to be fully alive in the world. The days grew warmer as spring settled into the town. Elena felt the gentle rhythm of life returning to a peaceful cadence, yet she noticed that something within her had changed forever. The quiet presence of the Apache man had left a mark that could not be erased. She walked through the streets with a lighter step, her heart more open, her mind clearer, and her awareness sharper. Life itself seemed richer, full of small details and subtle beauty that she had once overlooked. Even though their encounters had become less frequent, sometimes weeks would pass without a meeting, Elena carried the lessons she had learned from him with her. She noticed the world differently now. The sunlight reflecting on the fountain, the laughter of children chasing each other in the square, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, all of it seemed more vivid, more alive. She realized that the impact of their connection was not only about the man himself, but also about the way he had shown her to live fully in each moment, with awareness, patience, and presence. Elena had begun to notice the subtle shifts in herself. She approached her work with renewed energy and care, listening to the people around her with genuine interest. She found herself more patient with her siblings, kinder in her interactions, and more willing to trust in the flow of life rather than resist it. The quiet strength she had once admired in him was now reflected in her own posture, her calm decisions, and her ability to face challenges with measured confidence. One afternoon, she walked to the fountain, carrying a small basket of flowers she had picked from the fields outside town. She hoped, not expecting, to see him there. To her surprise, he was sitting at the edge of the fountain, hands resting loosely on his knees, his calm gaze fixed on the flowing water. When he noticed her, he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture that was full of recognition and warmth. Elena smiled and approached. "Hello," she said softly, her voice steady, but carrying a warmth she had never felt in the past. "Hello," he replied, his voice as calm and deliberate as ever. "You've changed," she laughed quietly, the sound light and carefree. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I'm just noticing more now." He studied her for a moment, his dark eyes steady and understanding. "That is good," he said. "Awareness is the beginning of everything. You see clearly now, and because of that, you move more confidently in the world." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water ripple gently in the sunlight. Elena felt a deep sense of gratitude. It was not just gratitude for him, but for herself. She had allowed herself to grow, to open her heart, and to learn from his quiet guidance. She realized that life had given her an unexpected gift, the ability to see, understand, and connect without rushing, without forcing, without fear. As the weeks passed, Elena noticed that her perspective on relationships, on challenges, and on herself had shifted. She no longer felt the need to control every outcome or to guard her emotions behind walls. She had learned that vulnerability could be a source of strength, and that trust, patience, and awareness could carry her through difficulties. These lessons were subtle yet profound, shaping her every thought, action, and choice. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and lavender, Elena reflected on everything that had happened since the day she first saw him. She remembered the first moment when his presence overwhelmed her, the way his quiet command had forced her to truly look, to truly be present. She thought about the small acts of kindness, the gentle guidance, and the deep, patient understanding that had gradually transformed her. She realized that the lessons he had shared were not just about him or about their connection. They were about life itself, about living fully, seeing clearly, and loving without fear. Elena began to understand that the Apache man's influence was not something that could be measured by the number of encounters or the words exchanged. It was a quiet, lasting force that would stay with her forever. She had been changed not by grand gestures, but by subtle, deliberate moments of awareness, presence, and patience. She felt stronger, calmer, and more capable than ever before. And she knew that the lesson she had learned would guide her through every challenge and every choice in life. One afternoon she found herself in the town square watching a young girl helping an elderly man carry a basket of groceries. The scene made her smile, reminding her of the ways small actions could have meaningful impact. She realized that the way the Apache man had lived his life, through quiet presence, deliberate care, and gentle guidance, had inspired her to approach the world in a similar way. She no longer sought attention or recognition, but instead focused on being fully present, helping others, and embracing the beauty of each moment. Even when she thought about him, she did not feel longing in the usual sense. Instead, there was a sense of peace, a deep awareness that his presence had given her the tools to face life fully, to connect meaningfully with others, and to trust herself. She understood that the connection they had shared was rare and extraordinary, but she also realized that its true power lay in the way it had awakened her own inner strength. One morning, months after their first encounter, Elena walked to the fountain once again. The Apache man was there, as if waiting for her, though he had never said he would be. He smiled gently, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, a quiet understanding passing between them. There were no words, no expectations, only presence. Elena felt the same overwhelming intensity she had felt the first time, but now it was tempered by confidence, trust, and awareness. She had grown, and she knew that she could meet his gaze fully, without fear or hesitation. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her gratitude. "For what?" he asked, though his calm smile suggested he already knew. "For everything," she said, "for showing me, in small ways, how to see, how to trust, how to live fully. I will carry this with me always." He nodded slightly, his expression serene, almost proud. "That is all anyone can ask," he replied. "The rest is yours to live." Elena walked home that day with a lightness in her step, feeling the sun warm her face and the gentle breeze lift her hair. She reflected on how far she had come, from a place of quiet longing and guardedness to a place of presence, awareness, and trust. The Apache man had been a catalyst, but the growth, the courage, and the strength were hers. She had opened her heart, allowed herself to feel deeply, and embraced the lessons of presence and connection. In the following weeks, she continued to carry these lessons into every aspect of her life. She helped her neighbors with patience, listened to her friends with full attention, and faced her own challenges with quiet confidence. She noticed small moments of beauty and connection everywhere: the smile of a child, the laughter of friends, the way sunlight reflected on water. These were no longer distractions, but reminders of the depth and richness of life she had learned to see. Though the Apache man was not always present physically, his influence remained a constant force in her life. She realized that some connections do not depend on proximity or frequency. They linger in the heart, shaping thought, action, and perception. His quiet command, his steady gaze, and his deliberate presence had awakened something within her that would never fade. She understood now that real transformation often comes not through dramatic events, but through consistent, subtle guidance, patience, and awareness. Elena's life was now richer, fuller, and more meaningful than she could have imagined. She moved through the world with a calm strength, a gentle confidence, and an awareness that allowed her to connect deeply with others and herself. The memory of the Apache man, the moments of shared silence, and the lessons he had imparted continued to guide her. She felt gratitude, peace, and a quiet joy that stemmed from the profound understanding that she had been forever changed by a presence so simple, yet so powerful. And as she walked through the town square one evening, the sun setting behind the hills, she smiled to herself. Life was a series of moments, some fleeting, some lasting, but all meaningful. She had been given a rare gift, the ability to see, to be present, and to live fully, and she would carry it with her always. The Apache man's quiet command, "Look at me, just me," had not only transformed her perception of him, but her perception of herself and the world around her. Elena felt complete in a way she had never felt before. She understood now that life's most powerful lessons often come quietly, in moments of presence, in acts of awareness, and in connections that do not demand but invite. She had been given the gift of seeing and being seen, and she knew that this would remain with her, guiding her through every sunrise and every challenge that lay ahead.